Hello, beautiful Dharma friends. I see many people are joining the class. I just thought I would start the live feed and spend just a couple moments saying hello. And then we'll move into meditation as per the usual class when we're gathered together at Rotary or elsewhere. We'll practice together this morning for around 20 to 30 minutes, and then I'll offer a teaching. In the chat box, you can say hello if you wish. Let us know you're here. I can see who's joining, but you are welcome to say hello to other people in the chat box if you wish. I see Al and Andre are here. Brad, good to see you. I don't actually see you, but I feel you. Diane, Donna, Jill, John, Lorraine, Marie, probably with Rod in tow, Melanie, Mir, hello, and I wonder if your children are going to study Dharma with us today. We've got Neil, Shelley, Taylor, and more joining all the time. So if you are new to me, one or two of you might be. I'm Cheryl, and welcome. You're saying hello in the, oh, Bob's there as well. Hey, Bob. Great to be joining you in this virtual Dharma class, the first of perhaps many for a while. We'll talk about that a little later this morning. I'm just going to wait another couple of minutes as people are joining us, and then I'll take us into a sitting, partly guided meditation. So good morning. Hello, everyone. Yes, interesting times to work with our mind, interesting times to gather as a community in this virtual way and support each other in this virtual way. So I want to thank Leo and Neil for supporting me to do virtual work. We've got a few ideas on how to bring more teachings to you in the next while. If you're joining us, feel free to say hello in the chat box. We've got Donna joining, Bethany. I can see who has joined. You can say hello in the chat box if you like. It's not required. Shelley's here. Great, wonderful. And more coming all the time. Beautiful. Okay, well, we're right at the top of the hour, so I'm going to begin the more formal class. The video cut out, is that just for me, says Alexis? I don't know. Is it cut out for anybody else, or are most of you seeing me? Okay, so I think most people are seeing Alexis. You could try logging out and logging back in. You can also try checking whether your video, depends on what device you're on. Sometimes it's easier to join on your laptop, but great. Hi, John, Rob. So it sounds like that's a unique to you, Alexis, problem. Don't you love technology? But at least you can hear me, which, since you'll have your eyes closed a lot, is probably the most important part. Okay, so we'll begin with an aspiration, as is typical and traditional in Buddha Dharma. We want to begin by setting our mind stream with right intention. Especially now, the mind can really be buffeted by circumstances, and reminding the mind of where we wish it to be, what our greater heart-based, compassion-based intentions are for self, for other, for community, for the planet, is a profound practice. If nothing else these days, I suggest when you wake up in the mornings, in the first 2 minutes before you get out of bed, set a loving intention for self and other for the day. So I'll model one here, partly traditional and partly in language that maybe will be useful language for some of you to try in the morning. So my intention is to work with the mind and the heart to be compassionate, awake, and loving, to turn selfishness into generosity, to turn anger into loving kindness, and to turn confusion into wisdom. May we all awaken swiftly for the benefit of all beings. Okay. Oh, good. Alexis is with us now on her computer link. So I'm going to begin this morning with a sit, a bit of a guided sit, to help us look at our minds, look at stories, look at what we can do when interacting with the contents of the mind as we're doing this. It's a bit interesting to teach in this forum because I can see myself. So I'm teaching to myself on camera, which is kind of fun and mildly distracting. So I get to practice my own mindfulness. Hello, Leo. Great you're joining us. I hope Chloe's with you as well. Great to have so many of you here. I'm really glad this is working for a lot of you. Feel free to say hi in the chat box for the next 60 seconds, because then I'd like you to be moving into meditation. You'll also have a question later in the class when I'm giving the talk, and after the talk, to ask some questions about working with your mind these days or any days. So, but for now, let's bring it into a practice together. So I invite you wherever you are to minimize distractions, shut down anything else on your computer. You're in your home environment, quite likely. There may be more busyness around you, pets, people, that's just fine. But as best you're able, shut down or allow to ebb and flow of the other distractions around you, and bring your experience to your direct experience. If you're working a lot with Mahamudra eyes open practice, you may wish to practice eyes open. But I suggest, even of those of you who've cultivated an eyes open practice, for this practice this morning, you may find eyes closed is even more beneficial as we go into a bit of an inner journey on looking at our own direct experience in the body, in the emotions, in the physiology, and in the mind. I'm going to use eyes closed myself, partly so I'm not looking at myself the whole time I'm teaching you. So, what I invite us each to do is to close our eyes and bring our attention to the current direct experience of the body in the chair or on the floor or the cushion or the couch, wherever your body is currently being held in relative stillness through sitting. And when I ask you to bring your direct experience to that, let me be more specific, especially if you're newer to the teaching. Can you explore the direct experience of what the points of contact feel like? The points of contact for me, I'm sitting cross-legged in this dining room chair. So I've got my buttocks contacting the seat of the chair. The sides of my calves and ankles are contacting the chair because I'm in a cross-legged posture currently. I'm also feeling support and contact along my lower and mid back against the back of the chair. So simply gathering your attention and focusing it as best you're able on one or more of the points of direct contact, physical sensation, physical contact of body contacting chair or bench, or if you're sitting with your feet also in a 90-degree, legs and feet on the floor, the contact perhaps of the floor under the soles of your feet. You can pick one of those points to focus on, or you can allow your attention to kind of gently move between points of physical contact. And for the next few moments, we'll practice anchoring the attention on points of contact, meaning when the attention jumps into thinking, or into a different body sensation, or maybe a taste or a smell, or a sight if your eyes are open, or the shadows and darkness over your closed eyelids, anything that distracts the attention away from the direct experience of the physical touching the physical. What your task is, what your invitation is to redirect the attention and refocus it on a point of contact. Right now, I'm focusing on the contact between my left ankle and the base of the chair I'm sitting on cross-legged. I'm inviting the attention to focus on that point of contact and stay there. When the attention roams to a thought or another distraction, I invite it to come back and I redirect it on that point of physical contact. We're gathering the busy mind. We're inviting it to settle and focus and make connection with one meditation object, in this moment, the object of that physical touch point. So I'm going to move into silence for a couple of minutes and we'll practice together, redirecting the attention to that physical point of contact over and over again. And if the mind has roamed into distraction or thinking, no problem, this is a training, it's an invitation, but I invite you to tighten up the attention, be a little more gently, lovingly firm with the mind, and redirect it for the next few breaths as solidly as you can, really placing the intention, encouraging it to stay, being a little more gently fierce, with really seeing if you can focus the attention on the anchor point of that physical contact of the lower body and chair, couch, floor, cushion. Be a little more strict with love and ask the attention to stay put for a moment or two. And allowing any tension in the body as best you're able, inviting any tension, tightness, distress in the body to begin to become fluid. Imagine tension starts to soften like an icicle beginning to melt. Whether that's emotional, psychological tension or physical muscle or ligament tension, you don't have to overthink it. Just invite the body and mind. Imagine tension loosening. Imagine coiling, uncoiling. Imagine holding, turning into loosening. And moving that into a bit of work with the breath. I'd like us all to imagine on the inhale, we're inhaling relaxation. And on the exhale, we're letting go of tension. Breathing in, relaxation and calm. Breathing out, loosening and unwinding and letting go. Practicing with that for a few minutes together. Redirecting your attention now to this step of the practice where you're imagining breathing in calm, relaxation, and soothing. And on the exhale, you're letting go and loosening and melting. Breathing in the idea of relaxation. Letting go tension on the exhale. And now I invite you to gently and kindly check in with the mind, the thoughts, the ideas in the mind, and particularly bringing attention, even conjuring up or checking in with thoughts related to the current situation in the world, in our homes, in our communities, related to the COVID pandemic. The multiple and dramatic changes in our lifestyles and our choices. And with as much compassion and non-judgment as you would bring to your dearest friend, were they struggling, bring non-judgment and compassion to the mind and just check in on thoughts related to COVID-19, be those thoughts of fears for your personal health or safety or that of those you love. Be those thoughts of dismissing what's happening and feeling it's an overreaction. Be those thoughts related to concerns about livelihood, income for self or those you know. Thoughts about lack of control, and for those many of us who can suffer from anxiety, what that does to the anxious mind and body. Just in your own way, spend a few moments checking in with some of the thoughts or feelings, some of the reactions you've had to the information, perhaps some misinformation that you've heard or read or been exposed to. Just checking in with gentleness with your mind, your sweet, loving, but untrained and sometimes troublesome mind. Just checking in like a mild cataloging. Oh, I was worried about this, or I felt confident about that, or I felt very annoyed and outraged when I read about that. Just checking in. Like you're looking through a library and looking at some of the topics or subjects on the library bookshelf of the mind. Without judgment, or rather when judgment arises, I shouldn't have thought that, or I'm so silly, or oh, cut it out, Cheryl. Just bringing sensitive kindness to the mind. It's attempting to keep you safe. It just sometimes does a clumsy job. Hello, mind. What have you been up to in your reactivity or thoughts? Some positive, some negative about what's happening in terms of our world in these interesting and uncertain times, March 2020. I invite you to take one thought, perhaps a troublesome thought, one that's creating distress or anxiety or is rooted in fear or concern, including very real world concerns. One thought or topic, just isolate that as best you can. I'm frightened that my pension benefits might stop, or I'm deeply worried about my friend or loved one who's aged and doesn't seem to be taking this seriously and is going out and about when they shouldn't be. Or I fear for my own mortality in a shortened life. Choose one thought that you've had or are having. It doesn't have to be the perfect thought or the ultimate thought. Choose one thought that is maybe a more challenging, difficult thought that leads to some challenging or difficult emotion, and bring it into the mind. I want you to imagine that the mind is like a stage in an empty theater, the way our theaters are empty right now. And you're inviting that thought to walk on stage for its moment in the spotlight. And you're a courteous audience member. You're about halfway back in an empty auditorium, watching the empty stage. And there comes the player of that thought. I'm going to lose my pension benefits and lose my home. What happens if my grandmother gets COVID-19? Will she die? Will there be treatment? Will there be masks? Will there be ICU beds? Invite that one thought. And I'm going to suggest you do something drawn from working with the mind from a Buddhist psychology perspective, from a Dharma perspective, and from a more traditional Western psychology perspective. It's not for the faint of heart, but I know you can all handle it. I want you, as you imagine yourself watching this thought, to give it the stage, give it the microphone, give it the spotlight for the next 2 minutes. And I want you to let that thought speak its greatest, biggest, most monstrous fears. Let it have at it. Let it say, you're going to lose your pension, it's going to dry up, your landlord's going to kick you out, there's going to be nowhere to stay. If you try to go stay with your friends, they'll turn you away because they'll be frightened. You're going to end up destitute, needing to go to soup kitchens, which might also turn you away because you're elderly. Really let that thought tell you what it wants to tell you. Have its monologue, tell you what its greatest fears are, and be a courteous, loving, non-judgmental audience member as best you can. And I'm going to give us 3, 2, 1, go. 2 minutes to indulge and honor that thought. Let it say what it feels it needs to say. Make the story, let it be big, and watch it from a place of distance. Go. And as you're watching that thought tell you its fears, its anger, its despair, notice if there's any impact in your body. There may be or there may not be. Let the thought, let the actor portraying the thought on stage as you're watching give you the most dire, dramatic rendition of this story. And notice if there's any reaction in the body. There may be, there may not be. This is a curiosity and exploration. You're partaking in. There's no right answer or no one experience. And next, I want you to imagine that the thought, the actor, the portrayer of that thought on stage comes to silence. It feels heard. It has no more to say right now. And you as a courteous audience member are then invited on stage. You wouldn't go unless you were invited, but you're invited on stage. And imagine walking up on stage, up to the thought. And imagine giving it a small bow of gratitude that this thought is trying to bring its beliefs to your attention. It's trying to tell you something, whether or not it's accurate or sensible. It's trying to educate you the best way it knows how, even if its information is somewhat faulty. It's trying to help. Its ways are clumsy. So imagine giving it a small bow, thanking it for its effort, and sending it off to its favorite socially isolated coffee shop to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and enjoy some quiet time on its own. Bless this thought and send it off. Be kind to this thought and send it off. And then allow that visualization meditation to slowly fade away. And draw your attention back to your body in your chair, couch, cushion, or floor. Breathing in a sense, an idea, a fantasy, an imagination of relaxation on your in-breath. And letting go tension on the exhale. Breathing in, relaxation and calm, or the idea, the invitation of relaxation and calm. And letting go tension on the out-breath. Bringing your attention, inviting your attention to focus once more where we began, focusing on a point of contact between your physical body and the object you're sitting on or the floor. Use that to ground the attention and anchor the attention, and as best you're able, for the next few moments until I ring the bell, direct and invite the attention to focus on that point of contact, the lower back against the back of the chair, the soles of the feet on the floor, whatever you choose. And if or when the attention goes to something else, thought, story, emotion, sensation, scent, taste, sight, sound, redirect it to the point of direct experience here and now of the physical body touching the physical form where you're sitting. And we'll practice together there, training and inviting the attention to settle for a few moments until I ring the bell. Good. I want you to check in with the mind and the body and just notice whether there are any differences from when we began. It's fine if there are, and it's fine if there are not. The mind may feel more calm and quiet. It may feel more busy and consternated. Maybe ebbing and flowing between different states, same as the body. There's no correct thing. Beware of striving and clinging and wanting to feel better and wanting to feel calm. No, it's a wholesome desire to desire calm over consternation, wisdom over confusion, generosity over greed, loving kindness over anger. But when we cling for something other than what's present, we're creating a type of suffering by not accepting what is. So simply checking in. How is this body doing right now? Does it feel anxious or calm? Is it in pain or in lack of physical discomfort? Checking in with the mind, noticing whether there are any changes through the practice or not. Those may have changed again in the couple of moments since I've started speaking. And then letting it all go. Checking in and then letting it all go. So what I intend to do today, as though we're gathered together in our typical human gathering, is to move into a Dharma talk. As I mentioned, if you have some questions, I'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. You could type questions in the chat box, and we'll have a few announcements as well about upcoming classes. I'll be able to teach weekly for a while, I think, probably in this form, at least in the shorter term. But for today, I've already introduced through the form of the guided meditation or the sitting together some of the concepts I want us to focus on together this morning. And they are the concepts of working with the stories in our mind and not automatically and consistently falling into the trap of believing the truth of the stories in our mind. By inviting you to bring one of your scarier or more distressing thoughts, particularly related to the changes in circumstances right now, the virus itself, physical illness possibility, economic and political changes. They closed the Canadian-US border to non-critical or non-important traffic last night. Big changes, an unprecedented change for that to happen. There's a lot of things that the mind can seize onto right now and create huge stories about. Those stories are fed by information, misinformation, opinion, etc. This is a fantastic time to be practicing with the mind, practicing with wisdom. There's nothing wrong with curating information and learning about what's happening, but watch what the mind is doing. Excuse me, someone was telling me yesterday that their extended family is watching the news all day long, in a lot of distress and a feeling of a lack of control. And watching the news is actually agitating them and making them feel worse. And this person's choosing to sort of pull themselves away from the consistent news feed. Be aware of what you consume these days. I'll share with you my personal choice currently. It may evolve. Is I choose to watch the scientific medical announcement each day in BC. I either watch it live or I watch it later on live stream to find out what the current cautions, recommendations, guidelines, and restrictions are for us in British Columbia in terms of our compassionate human behavior for self and others. I then do a judicious curation of other news so I am up to date and informed as a human, as a healthcare provider, as a leader in terms of my patients, students, etc. What are the safe and wise ways to interact? And then I watch something else, or I read, or I meditate, or I walk the dogs in social isolation in the woods. I hope you're doing some variation on that as well. And I invite you this morning to kind of review how you're choosing to interact with information and misinformation, depending on what you're reading. Some of it's accurate, some of it's hypothetical and maybe shown to be accurate. Some of it's frankly not accurate and inflammatory and potentially not great for your mind. However you're choosing to interact with information, you're interacting through your mind. You're not putting the information in your mouth and swallowing it. You're not spreading it all over your skin like a beautiful oil or a lotion. You're consuming through your mind. Be careful of your mental food. Don't eat a consistent diet of hot junk food that makes you ill. So just curate your mind, be informed, be wise, be involved, be compassionate, but also take very clear digital detox, news detox every day for large parts of the day. Meditate daily. If you have a prayer-based practice, practice prayer, yoga, silent movement, walking, hiking, being on the beach within the limitations of what's healthy and well in terms of social distancing. This may seem like really obvious advice. It is fairly obvious advice, but how many of us are following it fairly diligently? So check with your own mind, your own consumption, and I just ask you to ask yourself, are there ways I can more compassionately care for my mind, my heart, and therefore all those around me? What is healthy, useful, or what's the word I'm looking for? Ethically responsible to consume and to know and to therefore act upon? And what is more of an addictive loop of fear-based, anger-based, insecurity-based, fear of missing out based, consuming things that are not healthy for us. It's not a dissimilar teaching from what I've given many times before when we weren't in a worldwide health crisis around be careful what you watch, be careful what you read. Don't put a whole bunch of crap in your head at all times and then expect your head to be calm, clear, and compassionate. Be kinder to your head. So when you're having difficult thoughts, and I'm going to say when, because I think all of us are having difficult thoughts some of the time now, perhaps more than usual. You can, if you wish, practice what we just practiced together. You can imagine inviting that thought onto the stage of your mind and saying, okay, you're trying to tell me something, my friend. Have at her. Tell me what you need to tell me. And maybe it will go into a terrified diatribe. Things are going to hell in a handbasket, Cheryl. You're going to lose everything. Everyone's going to die. The world population's going to be wiped out. It's going to turn into an apocalypse. A neighbor against neighbor, barricaded in their homes, not sharing resources. That's a very scary story. And there's a small possibility chunks of it will come true. But when you don't face the fear and invite it to tell you and then see it as it is, it's an actor creating a story in your head. It isn't real in this present moment. That gives you the power to choose whether to keep watching that play or leave the theater and do something else. Now, I'm not meaning to make this sound simple. That would be irresponsible of me, wouldn't it? To pretend that we all have such well-trained mind, hearts, and beings that we can simply decide to stop having anxious thoughts. Oh, I wish that were possible for each and every one of us to simply decide. You're all very smart. None of you are masochists. I'm not a masochist either. If I could simply decide to have nothing but wise, loving, compassionate, clear thoughts at all times, that's what I would be doing. But I'm not an awake Buddha yet. So this mind can have some pretty crazy cast of characters as well. Be kind and gentle and forgiving with yourself if your mind causes you trouble some of the time. That's what minds tend to do. But by applying that little technique I've just taught you, and I really seriously mean, like, close your eyes, imagine a TV, a screen, a device, or, you know, I'm old school and I like live theater, so I imagine an actor on a stage. Give them permission, 2 minutes only, to give the worst case disaster scenario, the greatest, scariest monologue of all time. Thank the thought for trying to keep you safe, and then invite it to go have a beautiful cup of tea. All of this relates to Buddha Dharma, and I'm going to turn the language more into Buddha Dharma now for the rest of this short teaching today. I want to remind us of the 3 poisons of the mind, the 3 root negative emotions, which are the roots of all mental consternation, fear, all ugliness of the mind that can lead to ugliness of behavior. And this is a profound time to practice noticing when our mind is in the unwholesome side or the wholesome side of these 3 poisons. The word for poison in Pali is hetu, H-E-T-U. And the word for the antidote is ahetu. So we've got the poison, we've got the antidote to the poison. Who amongst us wants to let poison course through our mind and body? None of us. We want to apply the antidote as quickly and skillfully as we can, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us, so that we can stop the flood of the poison through the body and mind and return to the state of grace. The first, second, and third poisons, these are very familiar teachings to some of you. Some of you need a refresher, and to some of you, these may be new teachings, and I hope very helpful ones for you. The 3 roots of all negative emotion, fear, anger, hatred, delusion, are greed or selfishness. So that's one we're all familiar with in small or large degrees. Greed or selfishness is the first. Anger or aversion or hatred is the second poisonous emotion or mind state. And delusion, confusion, bewilderment is the third poisonous mind state. I'm going to talk about each of them a little bit, review for some of you, and talk about the antidote and how we can look at how these mind states are going to potentially play out in a more intense way right now in such uncertainty and confusion, and a time that can lend itself to a lot of fear, a lot of greed, a lot of hatred, and a lot of delusion. So what do we mean by greed, and what's the antidote? Well, I'm sure you can all guess the antidote immediately, even if you have not heard these teachings before. The antidote to greed is generosity, thinking of others, not just ourselves. So in terms of greed, greed happens when the self becomes realistically or in imagination, we feel threatened or frightened. And we tend to close in on ego, capital E, ego, and want to protect ourselves or our family or our loved ones. We see this in one very well-ballyhooed way in the media in terms of panic buying and hoarding of resources like toilet paper, like hand sanitizer, like certain foodstuffs, empty shelves on stores, despite the government reassurances that our supply chains are okay, that there will be enough product the same way there has been until now, and then would people please buy at their normal pace, maybe adding a little bit more here and there to kind of build up their stocks of food, etc., a little bit at a time. And if we all do that intercooperatively, we'll all be okay. Interdependent origination, I'll get to that a little later in this talk. When we're in greed, and we're all guilty of this some of the time, so let's be careful about judging those who bought a bunch of toilet paper. Some of us may have done that. We didn't do it because we're a jerk. We didn't do it to harm anyone else. If we did it, it's because from a state of fear and vulnerability, we were in a state of one of the three root poisons in every human mind, in every human heart. And unless you're a fully awake Buddha, and I'm not, there is sometimes greed, the tendency to protect myself, and then maybe my family, and then maybe my loved ones, then maybe my community, then maybe my country. The antidote to greed is generosity. So what can we do in small or large ways in this moment, after this class, for the rest of our day today and beyond, to remember generosity to self and to all beings? Can we, for example, this is a small example, someone I know went grocery shopping yesterday, and the store they were at had replenished their supply of toilet paper, and there was a sign saying, please limit it to 2 packages per buyer. And this person said, well, I don't actually need 2 packages in the near future. I'm just going to take 1. Just a tiny act of generosity, very small. But this is how we train our mind, folks. We train our mind by acting, not just listening, but acting from a state of generosity, particularly when we feel fearful, particularly when we feel that natural impulse to greed, to hoard resources, which comes from our caveman programming in the animal kingdom. Goodness, look at any neighborhood squirrel. Look at the nuthatches, those tiny little birds we have here in the Pacific Northwest. They're flying to my feeder and flying away and sticking sunflower seeds and whatnot. That's why they're called nuthatches, if you don't know, because they create caches of nuts or other things. So they bring some from the feeder and they take it and they hoard it. They bring some from the feeder, they take it and they hoard it. That's their inborn nature, to panic buy, to hoard, squirrels, etc. You're not a terrible person if, like me, at times you feel a sense of selfishness or the urge to self-protect. But you're also a budding awake person. You're fully awake underneath the clouds of confusion and poisons, and your better self exerts itself and tends to say, okay, my impulse was greed, take care of self. I can open up my palms and allow generosity to come out, and I can think of others as well as myself. So the first poison that may be accentuated in our minds and in our culture and in our human behavior right now is the tendency towards fear-based greed. It's very understandable. So please don't judge self and don't judge others. When we judge others for the very poisons we also have, we're being a hypocrite, and we're also adding to the problem. We're meeting unwholesome with unwholesome. If I can bring compassion and say, oh, I feel compassion for that person that is frightened and therefore bought a whole lot of supplies and was frightened about their own economic future and sold those supplies at a huge profit, it's very easy to judge that. But how about compassion for the fact that those activities were motivated by the poisons of greed, anger, and delusion? And that person, just like us, can be caught in the clouds and not see the sun. The second of the three poisonous mind states that are particularly powerful right now for some of us and in the world, and for us to look at and work with and hold gently, is the poisonous mind state of anger or aversion or hatred. The Pali word for that is dosa, D-O-S-A. The Pali word, by the way, for greed is lobha, L-O-B-H-A. Pali was the language spoken in the time of the Buddha, just to ground these in the historical teachings. When we're in a state of aversion, I just mentioned one way that many of us have fallen into states of aversion, hatred, judgment, or anger lately, is when we judge other people. For example, that person made $100,000 by buying all sorts of hand sanitizer at Costco and then selling it at a huge profit. And most of us probably judged that. I know I did. And the mind went towards an aversion toward that person, toward that behavior, a judgment. When I can remember the antidote to anger, aversion, and hatred, which is loving kindness and compassion, when I can remember, oh, that bad person doing that bad thing is my judgment, which is creating hate in my mind. It's putting poison in my own mind and heart. That's not smart, wholesome, or in alignment with Dharma. And I can step back and say, okay, mind had a judgment. I rejected that person's choices. And now I wish to retrain my mind towards compassion and wisdom by reminding myself that person was in a state of greed and fear and they acted in a way that is unwholesome. That's all. Same way I can sometimes. So the second poison is anger, aversion, or hatred. Different English translations of the Pali word dosa. Sorry, I have a dry throat. And we need more than ever to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. Let me say a little bit more about those beautiful, profound antidotes, those hetus, those beautiful ways to train the heart and mind. You're all naturally generous, you're all naturally loving, and you're all naturally wise. But the clouds obscure the sun, and we can get caught in a lot of delusion and confusion. That's the third one we're going to get to in a moment. Loving kindness. Many of you have practiced loving kindness with me, with other teachers. But one of the ways we can sort of contact that sense of graceful loving kindness, it's, the word is metta in Pali, and it's also translated rather beautifully as loving friendliness. Think of that warm, benign, friendly feeling you might have toward a favorite pet, or your grandchild, or your great niece or great nephew. Or perhaps you have a really lovely friendship with someone and it's a non-contentious friendship. You sort of a benign, sweet love for each other, very little drama, very little difficulty. That's the feeling you want to tap into. So right now I invite you to bring to mind grandchild, maybe your own child. We usually say grandchild because we want a more gentle connection. Our own child-parent connection can be quite intense, but any one you can bring to mind, four-legged or two-legged, perhaps winged, that helps you contact. Close your eyes for a moment. Bring to mind a pet, a grandchild, a dear friend, a gently beloved, someone with very little drama in that relationship. And just see if you can notice and contact that heartfelt sort of sense of graceful, warm, friendly, loving feeling. Loving kindness. Warm friendliness. As best you're able, see if you can imagine or feel the emotional, mental quality of this type of warm, loving kindness or loving friendliness. As I do this practice with you, I notice literally my chest area, my heart center area starts to feel softer. It's an ethereal feeling, not really a physical feeling, but it's like there's a softening and an opening around the heart, a gently. When I fall into judgment of person's panic buying or whatever it might be, There's a subtle quality, if I'm attending to the direct experience, of the heart closing or feeling tighter or more guarded. When I move into the idea of loving friendliness, loving kindness, the heart softens, it opens a little. This stuff is real, neurophysiologically, physically, in terms of neurochemistry, in terms of the felt experience, both spiritually, psychologically, and in the physical body. So I really encourage you, particularly during these difficult and uncertain times, to take a breath multiple times a day. You can set your watch to bing every 30 minutes or whatever you want to do. Stick sticky notes all over the place. Every time you wash your hands, take that mindful, quiet breath into the heart and bring to mind your dog, cat, grandchild, best friend, whomever, and just bring them to mind. Imagine them well and happy and frolicking. And just allow the heart to soften, contacting the antidote to the hatred, anger, judgment, tendency, poison in the mind. Okay? So from greed to generosity, from anger, hatred, pushing away, aversion, to loving kindness, loving friendliness. And let's take that a step further, because in the Dharma, it's not just about feeling kind and loving towards your pet, your friend, your lover, your child, your best buddy. We want to expand that sense to the universal, the sense of loving kindness for all beings. Now, we need a lot of that in our world right now, and we're seeing it in some places. We're seeing wonderful examples of compassion, of love, of people realizing the interconnectedness. I mentioned I was going to speak a bit about interconnectedness. I'm going to speak about that now. Then I'll get to the third poison I have not forgotten. Interconnectedness is something the Buddha taught very cleanly and very well and very often, because it is so important to remember that we're actually not alone. We are interdependent with others to a dizzying degree that we often don't think about in a very deep way. So here's a little thought experiment. Right now, wherever you're watching this, the majority of us are watching it from our homes or someplace like that. Probably almost all of us from our homes. Right now, I have a glass of water next to me. Right now, there's food in the fridge. There's pet food in the cupboard. Right now, there are supplies for daily living, shampoos, lotions, vitamins, a myriad of things. Right now, the lights are on here in British Columbia. The hydro is working. Right now, the heat is working. Right now, the propane that is delivered to my propane tank is working. Right now, hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of beings have been involved in that small, minor list of some of the things each of us have in our house right now. The persons who grew the food, who worked at the cannery that canned the food, who the truckers and others who brought the food to the store employees, management, and parent companies that created the grocery stores or the farmers markets, etc. The persons, myself or other, who went and purchased that food, brought it home, put it on our shelves. The persons who create the pet food, the persons who keep the hydro lines going, the parent companies, down to the person entering the data for your billing cycle, to all the persons out in the world making sure that the electricity stays on, and so on, and so on, and so on. I had a cup of tea this morning. I believe the tea was grown in India. The grower in India, the pickers in India, the persons who packaged and then exported it and then imported the tea, made it available for purchase. We are so connected, so profoundly to each and every ultimately human being on the planet. And now we're seeing that in a way that it can seem very frightening. The connectivity of being a host for a virus that can move from host to host to host, from human to human to human, and connect us in a way we don't wish, which is connecting us through an infection, more technically a viral, not really infection, a viral process that might make us ill or might leave us asymptomatic, but we're a host without knowing it, perhaps, and it can go from one to the other. We are not alone. We may be in isolation at this point, or in isolation with our partner or our small family. That's probably true for a lot of us on the call. A few of us are still working in a fair way under the guidelines of the BC Health Act right now, but we are deeply interconnected. It's when we forget interconnectedness that we're in trouble. When we forget, the person purchasing all the cleaning supplies and making money off it is connected to us. They were a member of the human and sentient being family. They too have greed, hatred, and delusion. They too have profound generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom at other times. That's when we don't need to feel so alone. Funny thing to say, when many of us, maybe not us meditators here, but many of us are feeling more alone in terms of literally being socially isolated than we ever have before. Now, shout out to the meditators, which are almost all of you. Shout out to those of you who've done meditation retreats of at least one weekend, which is the majority of you on this call. And for those of you that haven't yet, I hope you'll have the chance to do that soon in the next months or so. When I do a 3-month meditation retreat, I'm much more isolated than we currently are. I am at a meditation center with zero contact with the outside world, no books, no internet, no music, no phones, no iPods, no devices. I may have contact with my teacher. My teacher may teach some classes some days, other days not so much. That's the contact I have. If I have contact with other students, it's in silence. We don't talk, we don't interact, we don't hang out, and we don't watch Netflix. So being isolated by choice is something many of us in the Dharma choose to do, to work on our minds. Here we are, somewhat or entirely isolated by choice or by circumstances, and it's a profound time to work on our minds. Make this a meditation retreat. Yes, you may still be talking, interacting with your family, consuming entertainment, no problem. But bring the quality of a meditation retreat to this time when we have far less options and far less mobility than we usually enjoy. I'm going to return to that at the end, but I wanted to introduce those two ideas of the interdependent origination, the interconnectedness of all of us. None of us are alone. Even if you don't see another living human being for the next week or 2 or 3 other than online, you are not alone. And as a group, we're not alone. And as a community, we're not alone. And I'm going to make myself more accessible to you. We'll talk about that toward the end. The third, however, of the 3 poisonous qualities of the mind and the third antidote. I mentioned the third quality. We've got greed, we've got anger, aversion, and we've got bewilderment, confusion, delusion. This one's a little trickier to explain if you're brand new to the Dharma, but essentially, when we're bewildered, confused, or deluded, we're not seeing things the way they are. We're not seeing the truth of reality. And I can go into vast numbers of teachings here, and I won't for today's purposes. But the nature of reality is, and any of us who've studied the Dharma or the mind for any period of time, including for a day, have become aware of certain fundamental truths. Everything changes. Everything ends. We all will die. You don't need Dharma to know that truth. But in Dharma, we try to look at it more boldly. We try to really just see the truth of impermanence. Everything changes. We're in a very unusual rubber to the road, kick-ass teaching right now of how impermanent everything is. Our business trips, our trips to town, our accessibility to a restaurant, our ability to see our family. It's not wise for me to go see my family right now for a number of reasons. Different exposures, different jobs we have. So we had a Zoom call, it's like this platform, for my niece's 14th birthday the other night. We all got on computers, which is pretty funny. The elders that had never been on any one of those calls trying to figure it out on their phones, but we managed it. We're very interconnected, even if we're solo. Delusion is when we think things will remain the way we want them to. Delusion is when we think our plans will come true. Delusion is when we feel in control, because we're not in control of a lot of things. You're not entirely in control of your health, that's for sure. But we could get a cancer diagnosis right now, and we can't be in control of that. We can be in control of our treatment, our response to it, our mind's interaction with that situation, but we can't control very much. What we can learn to control is our mind's response to the uncertainty, our mind's response to the fact that everything changes and ends, our mind's response that in this human body, in this human life, other sentient beings too, there will be unsatisfactoriness or dukkha or suffering. The mind's response to the truth of mortality, whether it's today or in 75 years we leave this body, we will leave this body. You don't control that. We don't control this virus. We're scrambling as a globe to attempt to control the virus. We won't be able to. We'll be able to interact with, potentially mitigate, potentially maybe eventually have the development of a widely available antidote or a vaccine. Sure. But you will suffer more if you fall into the delusion that you can control your circumstances and keep safe. What you can do, and I'm very sure you all are, and if not, take this as your call to action to be doing it from this second forward. Control as much you're able your where you're going. Self-isolate, be wise. I'm not going to go through the health protocols here. You can certainly check those out or are aware of them in each of your provinces, towns, and countries right now. But be wise. You have complete control over being part of the solution instead of unintentionally part of the problem. Stay home, wash your hands, be wise, all these things that we're doing. That's why we're meeting virtually today. Although technically we could have met as a group of 10 people. What's the point right now? This way we can meet more of us and in a way that can serve more of us. Let me do a brief review. I'm talking today about many things, but how to work with the mind in uncertain times and the tendency of the human mind to fall into the three poisons. It's a pretty important word. It's a pretty literal translation from the Pali word that the Buddha used. Poisons in the mind, things that will lead to your illness, suffering, and death in the mind. If you cultivate them, you're welcome, Bonnie. Greed, selfishness, taking care of number one. Anger, aversion, judging others, pushing them away, setting me against you, country against country, neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, and delusion, refusing to see the truth of reality, which is everything changes. Suffering is part of being in a human body, so is joy, grace, compassion, and love. And the antidote to falling into confusion is to be wise. Now, in Buddha Dharma, wise doesn't mean smart, like the wise old owl. It means seeing the truth of situations. Not being in delusion, not saying, oh, well, it's just the flu and it's no big deal, the way almost all of us were saying 10 days ago. Then we got more information. We became wiser. We began to understand why this particular pandemic needs a different response to the regular flu season, etc., etc., etc. Delusion is where we forget we're interconnected. Delusion is where we believe we're the only person. Delusion is where we barricade our hearts, mind, and choices against others to take care of number one. Wisdom is when we reach out a hand in a healthy and loving way to each and every person. Can you be a budding bodhisattva in the middle of this crisis? The answer is yes, you can. What's a bodhisattva? A bodhisattva is someone who wishes to help all beings be free from suffering. The Dalai Lama is famously quoted as saying, "My religion is kindness." Can we practice that? Most of you already are, but it's a nice reminder together to support each other, to come back to the gentle wisdom of being kind together. Okay, I just want to check some notes I had made, and then I'll make room for a few questions if you like. If you have a question for me, you can type it in the chat box. It's completely fine if there's no questions. I have plenty of ideas for our last 15, 20 minutes together, so don't feel obligated to ask me a question. But if there's something that it would help you to ask me that I can try to answer, you can type it in the chat box. So how can we be a bodhisattva in difficult times? First, by taking care of our own hearts and minds. I strongly encourage you to be meditating every day, right now and always, for 5 minutes or 30 minutes, ideally 30 or more, because that is how we can pull our mind back from being on stage with the scary thoughts and in partying with the scary thoughts, and being that courteous audience member who's back watching the mind and has choice to engage with the mind in a healthy way, giving it its 2 minutes in the sun and then asking it to go have a cup of tea. Being a bodhisattva in hard times means being compassionate to ourselves as well as others. You're awfully hard on yourself. If you're in a state of fear, be gentle with yourself that you're in a state of fear some of the time. If you've made some impulsive decisions and done things that you now vaguely regret because you don't think it was your wisest self, be compassionate, forgive yourself, begin again. If you bought all the toilet paper on Vancouver Island, share it with your neighbors. Just begin again. Be compassionate with yourself as well as others. We're interconnected. We know impermanence is true. Things change. We know we can't know what happens next. How bad will it get before or if it becomes better? Will things level out and recover more quickly than we thought? They're saying different things every day. I'm not going to repeat them here because by the time some of you watch this, it will have moved on to new information. Impermanence. Impermanence. We also know that panic does not lead to good decisions. Being in a state of fear has basically never led any of us to make our wisest, kindest decision. So when in a state of panic or anxiety, that's where you need to practice loving kindness for yourself, gentleness for yourself. We did that in some ways at the beginning of this talk. We'll probably give you access to this talk and you can watch the beginning meditation and practice with it over and over if you like. But to remind you, I brought you to ground your direct experience in the physical body where your body was touching the chair, couch, or floor. So we started to simply bring you out of the mind and out of thoughts into grounding in the physical body, the solidity of here and now. Then I took you into some breathing in of relaxation and calm and imagining breathing out tension or distress. It's a very powerful, simple practice you can do multiple times a day for a few breaths at a time. I then took you into this thought experiment of imagining a difficult or scary thought on stage. You're watching it with compassion and curiosity, but with some distance. And then going up, thanking the thought and asking it to move on its way. You can think of the term bless and release there if you like. That can be a nice way to think about it. Any and all of those you can practice multiple times a day. Who can I be during this difficult time? I mean, each of us to ask ourselves that question. I want you to ask yourself that question right now. Who can I be during this difficult time? How can I be my better, wisest, most shining sun self? And when I get obscured by clouds and storms, how can I reemerge? And remember, okay, what would be generous to self and other right now? What would be loving kindness and compassion to self and other right now? And what would be wise instead of fear-based right now? Can I remember interconnectedness? Can I remember compassion? And can I remember we're all in this together, even if we're currently physically apart? I'll read a little something from I think this was a Tricycle magazine article this week. One doesn't have to be a Buddhist to know that ignoring difficult problems or thoughts does not make them go away. Or that when panic sets in, people tend to not make the best decisions. Or that the things we treasure won't be around forever. Or that no matter how alone we may feel, we're always part of something bigger. Or that we're at our best when we take care of each other. But Buddhist teachings place these ideas at the forefront and ask us to keep them in mind when we are otherwise prone to get swept up in our day-to-day tasks. There you have that. Now, what might we do? What might we do moving forward? Yes, Alexis, you can ask anything you want if you like, or we can wait to another time when we're speaking more privately. It's up to you. And Leo's got some info for you on how to do that. He's the expert of the Demio platform with me. I'll stay on with you here for about another 10 minutes. At the end, I want to read a poem to kind of draw things to a close. If you have a question or two, I'm happy to try to answer them. And we'll be sending out some information probably tomorrow, Sunday, in a newsletter. But I wanted to let you know of some upcoming opportunities to continue to practice and study together. The first is I will be able to teach weekly for the next while in this online forum. So we'll let you know when the next class will be. It was currently scheduled for Monday the 30th at 6:30 p.m. That's Pacific time if you're joining us from elsewhere. I may change that to a week from today to Saturday, given that my weekend plans are likely changed. Look, modeling good behavior. Although even better to have a Kleenex and throw it away. I didn't happen to have one handy. That's a dog hair tickling my nose sneeze. No need to be alarmed. So I'm going to teach weekly. The next class may be next Saturday. It may stay 8 days from now on Monday evening. We'll send out an email tomorrow to any of you on the Island Dharma newsletter list. If for some reason you're not on that list, you can type your email right now in the chat box and Neil will add you to the list. Or you can go to the Island Dharma website where we'll also update the information over the next couple of days. So I will be teaching and in a similar way once a week. Happy to do so. Also, I would like to hear from a few of you now. I'm considering and very happy to do so, that it might be really worthwhile for all of us, myself included, to potentially meditate together this week in the mornings. So I'm wondering if any of you would be interested. If I jumped on in the mornings, potentially on Facebook, potentially here, we would let you know tomorrow. But I jumped on in the mornings, say Monday to Friday this week, and we had a 15 to 25 minute meditation that I led and sat with you. Can you just say in the chat box if that's something you're interested in? Put a thumbs up or a yes if you would be interested in joining some or all of, without any obligation, a morning meditation together this week, Monday to Friday. Okay, I kind of thought that might be the answer. Many, many yeses. Okay. Well, thank you. We'll do that. I'm teaching some other things in the mornings. I cannot yet tell you what time, Andre. It will be announced tomorrow. We'll send out a newsletter. Probably something like 8 in the morning Pacific time, but don't hold me to that because I'm teaching my couples and many other people online as well. But Monday to Friday this week, and then we'll see how we go. We might keep doing that. Let's join together. Some days it might be 10 or 15 minutes. It might be up to 30 minutes, and there's multiple reasons as to which platform we might use. So we'll be letting you know what that decision is. There's all sorts of logistics to make it easiest for all of us. So, okay, we'll meditate together. We'll meditate together in a moment to close this class, and we'll announce those times, and you can drop in hopefully to all of them or to some of them together. Okay. Yes, Alexis and I were talking a little bit about this. Yes, Brad, probably it will be recorded. Probably the morning meditations will be recorded and you'd then be able to watch them at a different time of day. Thank you for asking that. That's one of the things we want to do. So nobody's left out, particularly if you're an essential service and can't make this specific time we choose. So we'll do everything we can to make it as accessible to all of you. Alexis asks a question that I think applies to many of us right now, and it's a very good question, and I'll give a few thoughts on it, but they're not the definitive only thoughts on it. Alexis has a type of work where she's deemed an essential service in sort of the healthcare support world, as many of you on the call are, myself included, in a gray zone there right now. However, Alexis, like some of us, also live in a household where there are some immunocompromised persons and or elderly persons with some health concerns. So her moral ethical dilemma as a budding bodhisattva wanting to save all beings, thank you, is: should I go and work to serve the beings I am able to serve in my work role, which my heart and my being would like to do? Or is it wiser and a better choice in terms of health and ethics and compassion to potentially not go work, because I would then potentially be exposed out in the world and potentially be bringing home the possibility of a viral infection to a household where elders and immunocompromised persons live? I can't make that decision for you, and I encourage you, like myself, to watch Dr. Bonnie Henry's daily updates online or live on the evolving situation in British Columbia. What I can do for you, Alexis, is forward you some guidelines they've sent out to all healthcare professionals, psychologists included. They may help with your decision. But it sounds like there is no one right decision here, because you're feeling torn between potentially not serving vulnerable clients that you'd like to be there to serve in your work role, and potentially inadvertently creating a risk maybe to elder or immunocompromised persons. So maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe there's a middle ground where you could continue in your work life, but you would need to self-isolate away from your family members when you weren't at work, which has, of course, longer-term implications as well. If these restrictions stay in place for some time, which it's possible they may do, does that mean you don't see your family? I'm not visiting my mother in person right now, even though she only lives 1.5 kilometers away. It's wiser to do that in long distance. So what I appreciate about the heart of your question is you're with a compassionate heart, trying to balance concern and some irrational fear and some very rational, wise decision making. So I don't think that helps very much in terms of your actual decision, but I'm pointing you to look at weighing the implications, and there may need to be a middle ground if you do choose to work and to fulfill that essential service role as best you're able. Then you might need to self-isolate and stay away from your family. And I believe you live in a shared home where you could actually not share space with them, and you might have to do that. And take it day by day, because things are going to change day by day. Not easy times. So on that note, let's refresh. I'll be offering a class once a week for the near or indefinite future in this form until we can join again safely and well in person. Starting Monday for this week, we'll do a trial run. We may continue it for a while, but this week, Monday through Friday, I'll show up for at least a short meditation together between 10 and 30 minutes. Time to be announced, but approximately 7:30 or 8 or 8:15 Pacific, probably. They'll either be available and live on Facebook if we use the Facebook platform, or they will be available in some manner. That gets a little tricky, but stay tuned. Lots of questions, I'm sure, but stay tuned. We're going to do our very best. To that note, Neil and Leo, who are both on the call, could I have a brief conversation with you in about 10 minutes after I hang up, and we can have a little powwow about how to best serve the community in that way? Yes, I'll send you those guidelines, Alexis. Email me, Alexis, to remind me. I've got a few things on my plate today, and I'll just send over what the BC Psychological Association guidelines that they've sent us that link to the BC Health Workers Guidelines. Thanks, Neil. All right. So for now, let's bring this to some stillness. There might be a fair bit of questions and consternations, good and less good in the mind. And let's spend 2 or 3 minutes to close and then end with a dedication of merit until we meet again. We'll be sending out an e-newsletter tomorrow, Sunday, with updates on the next class. And these morning meditations we'll jump in together with today. So as best you're able, bringing your attention back to the present moment in the body, in the mind. I encourage you to contact the base, body touching couch, chair, or floor. And exhaling as best you can, exhaling tension, question, no answers. Just being, breathing. And imagining a warmth, a wise openness in the middle of your chest, in your heart center. Compassion and wisdom replacing fear and confusion. Beginning again each moment to contact our wiser, bigger self. Dropping into our experience, first some self-care, some self-compassion. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering in body and mind. May I lead with compassion and wisdom, and generosity as much as I'm able. May I remember the interconnectedness of all beings. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering. May I remember interconnectedness. And expanding those good intentions to all beings. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering in body and mind. May all beings lead with compassion and generosity and wisdom. May we remember our interconnected natures, and may we all awaken swiftly. Closing with a dedication. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings act from their higher, better, awake selves with generosity, compassion, and wisdom. May we care for each other and our own good hearts in these difficult times. Well, I'd like to thank you all for your kind attention today, and I'm glad this felt of helpfulness to all of us. It was lovely for me to share the Dharma and to share your Dharma and to connect with my own more compassionate, wise self in this forum. So stay tuned for an email announcement about coming attractions, and I'll look forward to sitting with you on Monday morning. It'll be a wonderful way to start our days. So thank you, and lovely. Yes, lovely to have some of you from further away. That's one of the benefits of this. Oh, Hetel, how lovely you're here. You read the email this morning. That's wonderful, wonderful. So great. Many other people may be joining our Island Dharma community as I open these classes up to any and all beings who would benefit in any manner. So thank you for your kind attention. I look forward to seeing you and sitting with you and being with you in these days. Oh, thank you for your kind question, Lorraine. We'll put something about that in the newsletter for those that wish. It's not necessary, but always gratefully appreciated. The best dana you can give is generosity to a neighbor, a friend, someone who's lonely, a FaceTime call to an elder, or to donate to something in your hometown, your backyard that could use some resources right now. Thank you very much. We'll see some or all of you on Monday. Bye for now.